Good morning, PAX. How are you all doing? This is awesome. Thank you all for coming here. My name is Danny. I run a video game documentary website channel thing called Noclip. Thank you. Cheers. Some of you may have watched our series on Hades, Developing Hell, which is currently running. I'm the only person here, though, who does not work for Supergiant Games. These wonderful people on the table have all been part of the team since the studio was founded 10 years ago, and we're going to get into as much of that history as we possibly can today. Before we do that, though, we need to find out who you people are. So, I mean, there's a lot of games they've put out, there's a lot of fans of those games, so I guess let's start chronologically. Who here is a fan of Bastion? That's my bad. I didn't say raise your hands or clap, so we had a lot of this happening. So I guess let's go with clap then. How about Transistor?
Pyre.
More.
Yeah.
Awesome. From covering the studio, I know the next group are perhaps the most hardcore of them all. Fans of Pyre.
The book on my nose.
Nice. And how many of you have somehow managed to figure out how to install the Epic Game Launcher? I don't know how it works. To play Hades. Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you for introducing yourselves. I think it's only right that we get you folks to introduce yourselves. So, starting at this end of the table, I guess in the guise of our documentary series, can you tell us who you are and what your job title is?
Sure. I'm Amir Rao. I'm the studio director for Supergiant.
Woo!
Gavin Simon, development director.
I'm Andrew Wang, technical director.
I'm Darren Korb, audio director.
Take that, engineers.
I'm Logan Cunningham. I do voice stuff.
I'm Jen. Oh, sorry, I'm loud. I'm Gen Z, and I'm the art director.
Hi, I'm Greg Kasava, and I'm creative director.
I spend a lot of time going to studios these days and talking to people who are, have been making games for a long time. You guys are quite a unique bunch in that all 10 of you who worked on Bastion are still here today. And actually, perhaps more unique is how you all got to know each other. First question is for you, Amir. How did everyone come together? They all seem to be connected to you in some way.
Yeah. So Gavin and I worked together at Electronic Arts. Andrew and I were interns at EA Tiburon. I worked on a critically acclaimed video game called Superman Returns, the video game. There. Andrew, you worked on
Madden for the PSP, or head coach maybe.
Yeah, head coach for the PSP. Yeah. Head coach for the PSP? Yeah, there we go. That's what I thought. Darren and I have been friends since we were like 8 years old. We've been friends for a long time. Been in bands together. And yes, I love him. And then
I love you.
Logan, how do we know each other? Because
Youth soccer.
youth soccer. Brought it. Yeah, there we go. There's a lot of Demolition Men fans out there, or whatever we were. And then Jen.
Alex Ahad.
Alex
Of
Ahad.
Skullgirls fame. If anyone here knows Skullgirls.
Yeah.
We owe Alex Ahad our lives.
Yeah.
Logan and I went to high school with Alex Ahad, and we're friends with him.
Yeah.
And he hooked us up.
Yeah, I was working with Alex Ahad at a company called Gaia Online at the time. We had both yet to go into the indie scene, and I guess they were childhood friends,
Yeah.
and they needed an artist. I rose to the challenge.
Yes. And then Greg. EA.
Yep, back in the Command & Conquer days, working
Yeah.
on games about
Yeah.
tanks and little dudes blowing each other up. You could see the influence on the games we've made since. in all seriousness, there's some there if you look for it.
Yeah. And so me and Gavin and Andrew and Greg and all these people down in Los Angeles started talking about starting a company someday. And then that day was September 1st, 2009. And so if we make it to Sunday, that's 10 years for us.
At the stroke of midnight.
While we're on the topic of old games, actually, it always is interesting to see what studios people worked for or what games they worked for in the past. Andrew, you worked at Infinity Ward before joining
Yeah,
Brew,
just
right?
before I worked on Call of Duty 4 and Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare and then Modern Warfare 2.
Excellent. What other games did you guys work on?
So the first game I worked on was Red Alert 2 at Westwood Studios. Very, very long time ago. Generals, many of the other Command & Conquer games, Battle for Middle Earth series, so a lot of RTS games for a long time.
Yeah, in my case, I joined in the Command & Conquer 3 days. I think I met Gavin and Amir on my very first day there. That was in 2007, right at the start. And then after EA, I worked at 2K Games for a year on Spec Ops: The Line before reuniting with these guys.
Excellent. We're very fortunate to have a sort of a great archive of your early days on the Giant Bomb Building the Bastion series, which you can go watch on YouTube on Giant Bomb now. Well, don't do it now. Yeah, shout out for Giant Bomb.
Yeah.
There we go. But for the folks who haven't watched that, tell us about those scrappy early days. I guess, Greg, in that house down in the South Bay, how did that all come together?
Yeah, I should really throw over to, not to dodge the question, but I should throw over to Amir and Gavin because they're the ones who hunkered down that house first and you know, the rest of us joined them along the way. But they were living where they were working, and you got to tell the story about your car along the way, Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, Gavin and I we moved our stuff up in a U-Haul, first into my mom's house, then my dad's. And my dad said, you know, we should start a company when we're young, just so if we failed, we could find jobs 2 years later, and it would be fine. So we were working in his house. We got 4 IKEA desks, even though there were only 2 of us, because we were like, there will be more people here someday. And
It made a square.
It made a square. It needed to be symmetrical also. And so we were in the living room. We were in the living room of my dad's house. And we started working on Bastion by scanning art out of D&D books and stealing stuff from the internet. And then hoping someday we would meet someone like Jen. You know, we needed audio in the game, so I talked to Darren because, you know, we were in bands together. That's sound. It says sound-like quality. And, you know, Andrew and I were roommates. Greg and I had lived together. It just made a lot of sense to put this group together. Yeah, early days in the house were like your car running out of battery.
Yeah.
Because we didn't go anywhere.
Didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it was super exciting. Yeah, we just worked all the time. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what there else to say. We just started, and I was actually, people are like, was it terrifying? Was it scary? Not really, because we had no idea what we were doing or getting into. So it was totally fine. Like, it got a lot scarier later.
Yeah. It's hard to just be scared when you're just sitting in a living room.
Yeah.
Staring at a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
You anyways.
Who was the first person to come on then, or who were the first set of people?
It was kind of all in a similar time. There was just, we sort of were getting advice from Andrew and Greg, and they came on at some point. Darren was one of the first people also. He did the first sounds in our first demo, and yeah, I mean, I think it was basically over the course of 9 months, the 7 of us were all working on the project.
Darren, do you have any, what are your early memories from then? Did you have to move to California for it, or Bay Area?
No. So I was living in New York at the time, and I worked remotely through all of Bastion and Transistor, actually, and I was living in New York. I remember the first time I heard about Amir starting a company, and we were at a little dive bar around the corner from the Brooklyn apartment that Logan and I shared. And, yeah.
Is he shaking his head about the dive bar or the apartment?
Oh, the apartment.
Oh yeah, it was filled with rodents. They were not our pets.
Like eight mice in a week?
We caught there were a lot of mice. But so we were at this little dive bar around the corner from the place, and Amir starts telling me, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a company. I was hoping you could do the audio. I was like, yeah, before you even finish the sentence, because I'd never thought about doing that as a job, but when the opportunity came up, I was like, oh yeah, of course I want to do that. I'll figure it out. I didn't know how to make sounds or do any of that stuff at the time. I was like, yeah,
You got to make some sounds.
I'll figure it out. Yeah, I knew how to make sound. I knew how to make like mouth noises. I hadn't like made sound effects before, so yeah, that was sort of my earliest memory. Was like, it was probably maybe August of like right before or something. It was like probably August you came to New York, I think, of 2009 and visited.
Excellent. How did Logan get involved then? I don't want to say it's just because he was your roommate. That seems reductive considering his breadth of work.
I mean, Amir, Darren, and I've known the two of them since I was 14.
Right.
And all I knew was like, oh, my friend Amir is making a video game and they need an actor. And I'm the actor that they happen to know. I'm like 7 feet away from the like person doing all the audio. And I was cheap.
Yeah. We were all cheap. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I was doing a friend a favor. That's all.
Right. Awesome. And Jen, how about yourself? What was it like when you joined the crew?
Well, I got an email from Amir. I think it was March.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was before
remember
GC.
reading this email, and the two distinctive things about it were, one, that they were willing to pay me, which if any of you are artists, you know how many emails you get. Oh, please, can you just, I love your work so much, but I'll pay you in pogs, you know? It's like, so they were willing to pay me, and then the second notable part of it was that they were Command and Conquer devs. And I was a huge Generals fan, and I remember being like so excited, being like, oh my God, it's my opportunity to make an RTS. Like, these guys are gonna make an RTS, right? Like, it's my dream. So I responded back, and you know, I found out it was not in fact an RTS, but it was still isometric, so that like kind of counts. But yeah, from there I like contracted with you guys for like 3 months, I remember, and it was like sending them you know, paint-overs of things like the Bastion, and they already had a prototype stood up, as they mentioned, with like some older art, and I just remember getting these emails back from Amir where he had red penned my work, and he'd like circle parts of it, like parts of the grass, and be like, "This looks unfinished."
Yeah. I was
So
criticizing
Amir was
Gen
the
Z's
art
art.
director back then. It was really great, but no, it was clear to me very quickly that these guys like were serious, and they were good at their work. And then after a couple months, you guys asked me to join you, and I occupied the third table at Elwood Road. Have we mentioned that it's Amir's dad's living room that we were working out of?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the place we grew up playing D&D was like
And
where
the very room in which I had my first drink.
Yeah. Like a Mike's Hard Lemonade or something.
And Southern Comfort.
Oh, God.
Developed your voice.
That's a secret.
Excellent. Thanks to whoever ran your Facebook group as well. We have no shortage of very cute photographs of you back then.
Oh, yeah.
I believe this is setting up for your first PAX, right?
Yeah, this is PAX in 2010.
Right.
So we applied, we worked on our game for about 6 or 9 months, and then we applied for the PAX 10, which is something you can still do today. The PAX 10 used to be in the spot where our booth is today, actually. So it's pretty amazing to occupy the spot where we basically got our start as a company. Yeah, we drove up from San Francisco to Seattle in a day, which was misguided, I think, as an idea. This is us before that started.
yeah.
There was a single table, and we had the setup there showing Bastion, and we brought cookies. My wife baked cookies because we thought we might have to bribe people to play the game, because we had no idea what to expect. And instead, everyone was incredibly kind. They would play it, and you know, I didn't really know how the game was doing, but the next day, this man, Dino Patti, who made Limbo, he was one of the co-creators of Playdead, came by, and he was like, I went to a party, and everyone was talking about your game, and I was like, how do I go to this party? Yeah, it was pretty incredible. There was actually, I remember one of the first compliments we got, this dude, Michael Leon, who worked at Warner Brothers, who would go on to to help distribute our first game, Bastion. He played the game, takes off his headphones, he doesn't say anything. And then we go around the back to the part where everyone smokes at PAX. And he looks at me and he goes, "You have no idea how much shit I play and how little of it I like." And he's like, "I love your game," basically. And it was a weirdly, really relieving thing to hear. This is a person who plays video games essentially for a living. He signed Scribblenauts, which was an amazing game over there at Warner, and he thought we had something kind of good. So it was a totally surreal and weird experience in every respect. And I'm sure these guys have other stories of it, but that's the stuff I remember.
Yeah, anyone have any memories from that first PAX? What it was like showing off the game, showing off your work to the public for the first time?
Yeah, one of the things I recall about it that was really, I think we were all kind of taken aback by it, was just seeing people like visibly delighted by the game. They, just start laughing or smiling or something like that. And we, several of us had been working on games for years. But I myself am like I might be playing my favorite game of all time. I'm still sitting there stone-faced, like I'm not a very expressive game player, but, and even back in our Command and Conquer days, like I don't know, people are just intensely playing their RTS games. And so seeing that our game could affect people like that in such a positive way so quickly was like, wow, this really, I think that's when we realized how much potential it actually had, so.
Yeah, did it feel like a different sort of world after that PAX? Because it seemed like that was the first time the world really got to see what you were up to.
Yeah, I mean, from there on out, we decided to work with Warner Brothers on distributing the game, and we went to PAX East a few months later, E3 a few months after that. It was kind of like full speed ahead from that moment forward. It was like a rocket ship kind of took off between the kind of interest in the game and also what we had to do from a development standpoint. Like, the funny thing was we got a lot of comments saying like, wow, where could I get this? We're like, they'd play our little 20-minute demo and they thought the game was done, right. But we basically didn't have anything except those 20 minutes. Like, the rest was just all like real rough prototype. We proceeded to make the rest of the game. It's like roughly an 8-hour game between, that was September, and then like by May of the following year, we were done. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's weird in game development. It can take you so long just to get to the first, just to figure out what you're doing, and then you finally understand what you're making, and from there on out, you can kind of get the rest of it done much faster. But we had to, Amir can speak to it, we had to, building the studio, finishing the game, signing a publishing agreement, all this kind of stuff happening, and building the team, all this stuff happening in parallel. So busy times.
Yeah, let's talk about that whole period, because it's funny, and we'll sort of have the flip side of it, I guess, when we talk about Transistor and how difficult it was to get, I guess, find the idea that you ended up running with. I was talking to you, Amir and Greg last week, just about how it seemed like the concept for Bastion just kind of flowed out of you. Like it was relatively, I don't want to say easy, but it was more simple or easier than other projects could have been. I want to ask the rest of the team what their experience of that was as well. Jen, what was it like trying to, I guess, come up for the aesthetic for this game? You'd been hired, no one else on the team does that type of visual work, so you've got quite a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, I guess?
Yeah, it was a lot of responsibility, but a lot of creative freedom. And I think I was at a point in my career where I really wanted that, and I had spent the first 23 years of my life filling myself with inspiration and the desire to create something in isometric. You know what I'm saying? And so it actually came right out of me, like diarrhea. It was so great. It was completely natural, and these guys gave me so much freedom up front. They were just just try whatever you think is going to be good. I looked at the prototype and I was like, I know what to do. I've played a lot of JRPGs and I like color a lot. So it flowed right out. There was some fine tuning. I'm looking at the Bastion screenshot to remind myself of who I was back then. But it was really a delight, basically, to just go crazy. and figure out what this world would look like, because I actually think I had the easiest job of everyone on the team because so much of it had been stood up at the time. Like I already had access to some of Darren's tracks, which were awesome, and I was like, yeah, I love video game music. And so I just like listened to that as I like stared at the prototype and then replaced all the tiles and everything. But yeah, it was easy. Easy as pie.
Yeah. The takeaways from the panel is it came out like diarrhea, and it was easy.
That's right.
That's all you have to remember.
The hardest part was like early on. I thought so like because we were in a living room, the only like meeting room was actually the backyard, and at that time, you know, they didn't know if they could trust me, like this untrustworthy face. And like, I remember Gavin and Amir would always go out into the backyard to like have meetings, and I always thought that they were just trying to figure out how to fire me. So after the PAX 10, I was like, okay, you know, I get to stay, right? I get to stay.
Excellent. Darren, yourself and Logan, I feel like you know, I wasn't in the press when Bastion came out. I remember reading the reviews, and so much of the chatter was about the amazing soundtrack, the great writing, the fantastic voice work, and it was such a new thing as well. The idea that these characters were, or I mean, the narrator was voicing along with you, and that playful element of it. Can you cast your minds back to like how that sort of got formulated, or working with Logan on that? And you know, the difficult thing I guess about sound work is that you can always kind of iterate on it. You can always do one more take. Like, did you feel comfortable about how it was working, or did you really not know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we sort of stumbled upon the idea of having the reactive narrator was, you know, we were just sort of trying to figure out a way to convey story in the game, and we had several ideas that we tried, and then somebody thought, hey, we have access to a really good actor. Let's see if we can put some voiceover in and see what that does for the game. And as soon as we did some tests where we had Logan do a few different types, like a few different kinds of voices for narration, and we put him into the game. And as soon as we did, it was like, oh, that's cool. Let's keep doing that. Let's keep working on that. And so we arrived sort of at the actual voice, I think. I mean, Logan would watch Deadwood like on a loop, like in his room. So I was like, well, we both have like a lot of movies that we've both seen and stuff, and a lot of shared references, I think.
Yeah. Is anyone familiar with the podcast, Last Podcast on the Left? So Marcus Parks is a good friend of mine, and he introduced me to Deadwood the summer before I started working on Bastion, and I actually thank him in the credits of Bastion, because that was my introduction to Ian McShane, and I just developed like a huge actor crush on his voice, and I would just walk around our horrible apartment doing his voice. And it was this long vocal warm-up that I think primed me for Bastion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think the character of Rux ended up being basically a combination of, Al Swearingen from Deadwood, Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York, and
Sam Elliott from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, the narrator. Yeah.
The dude above.
Do it again.
The dude above.
We could just do that for the next 40 minutes. I'm sure people will be totally happy.
Repeat the dude above.
If you cast your mind back to that time period as well, like video games were in such a different space, like in terms of the platform. I was watching the reviews for Bastion. Greg Miller did the one for IGN, and he referred to it as a great downloadable game, a concept that now we just completely take for granted. Darren and Andrew, I guess on your end, on the technical end, how difficult was it to, I guess, launch or build a game that was going on a downloadable platform that way? Was it a different, I guess, muscle, or was it something that you were sort of familiar with from your previous work?
I don't think I thought about it too much. It's just like, we're going to make the game, it runs on a computer of some sort or console, and, we'll find a way to get it out there. And if anything, the idea of it being downloaded it's just going to make it a lot easier. We don't have to find out how to deal with Walmart or Target or anything like that.
Start your game 3 months before.
Yeah, or just use internet. So we just started building the game, and we'll find a way to get it to people later. And, when we met, Warner Brothers and other people, they provided us a good way to do that.
Excellent. Was the process at that stage kind of like, had the path been cut by other people ahead of you? Because it seems really early in the sort of downloadable game space for me, but perhaps maybe everyone had their ducks in a row by then.
They're definitely forerunners to us. Amir mentioned Limbo, Castle Crashers, Shadow Complex, a lot of really amazing games that we were looking at out there that were like doing really cool stuff that we thought we could, do as well.
Excellent. And do you remember what it was like back then, Andrew?
Yeah, like Gavin's saying, I think we didn't think too much about it. We probably, looking back, should have thought more about it at the time. Because then, when everything was running smooth and fast, when it was just gray boxes, and then music starts coming in and the art starts coming in, it's like, oh, they're actually doing more features now. And and then we have to put it on the Xbox. And how do we even get the game onto the Xbox to run it? And so that would have ended up just being a pretty interesting time to just, as the game got better and better, we're just kind of shoveling water out the out of the boat to try to keep everything going. And but yeah, it was a lot of fun and a lot of learning happened at that time.
And I mean, then the game comes out and everything changes, right? We're sitting here with this massive room full of fans here, hanging out. I'm sure you picked up some fans at the PAX 10 that year, but then once the game comes out, right, that's when this community starts to get built, starts to form and interact with you guys over the course of the next decade. Greg, obviously you worked for a long time in the games press. You were reviews editor for GameSpot, which at the time was the biggest game site in the world and still one of the biggest. But what was it like for you once, I guess, the critical reception got hit? You were kind of used to it, I'm sure, from the EA days a bit, but this was your baby, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember thinking even before we got any reviews in, it's like Bastion was my first opportunity to work on a story in a game and create characters and build levels. It was like all the stuff I wanted to do since I was 8 years old, and I finally got my shot. And I'm like, we got some, we got playtest feedback along the way. Some of it was promising, but you kind of never really know until it comes out. And it's like, whatever happens, this is something I feel really, really good about personally. And then because kind of like what Jen was saying, I think for a lot of us it's just kind of like our shot to just take everything, all those influences. It is like, for many of us, 20 plus years of kind of pent up wanting to make video game energy and cast into this one game. And then the response was really, really, it was great. But the interesting thing for us was that it wasn't this grand slam home run type of thing out the gate. It was actually this really surprising slow burn where a lot of the success actually happened over time. It wasn't this smash hit overnight because the game came to Steam in August. So it launched in July on Xbox 360, and then it came to Steam in August. Started to do pretty well there. But then over the course of the year, there were Steam winter sale and stuff like that. The game kept bubbling up in conversations, and it just kept selling, which we were shocked by because the conventional wisdom at the time is there's even a formula for it. It's like, hey, if you're a single player only game, you take your first 2 weeks of sales and you multiply it by 3 or something. That's your lifetime period, end of story. But Bastion did a lot better later than it did at the start, to our shock. And so it was only gradually that we realized wait a minute, this is a big hit, and we get to stick. We had no real expectations of necessarily being able to stick around because Bastion was all self-funded, and our independence is really valuable to us. So it's hey, if this does well, it would be awesome to stick together, but we know what the odds are, so let's not count our chickens before they hatch. But by the end of that year in 2011, we're oh man, this did really well, and it started winning awards and all kinds of stuff. Thankfully, Journey got delayed until the following year. So,
reaped all the benefits.
Thank you, that game company. Game turned out amazing.
Excellent. You spoke about how, obviously for Bastion, it was a game that you were wanting to make, all of you collectively on your own paths for a long time. And then we come to Transistor, which I was sort of interested and a little bit shocked to hear kind of took a while to find its feet. I think, was Amir were saying it was like 19 months of pre-production on Transistor?
Yeah, Transistor was really a hard game for us. It took us, we were in pre-production for 19 months, which is like hilariously long for us because Bastion was in pre-production for like 10 minutes and then we just started making it. So the challenges were we had never started something with the 7 of us. We had only finished something with the 7 of us. So now, how does a team that's highly collaborative figure out how to do a new thing together? Which is like, you don't get that automatically because that's not how Bastion was made. Then, there was stuff we just like never talked about. Like, the pressure that Bastion was exerting on every like aspect of the game. Because we actually started Transistor, we sort of thought Bastion was like, did fine. We didn't even know that it was gonna do well. That's how Transistor started. Transistor started with a simple idea. It was gonna be a sci-fi love story, and we didn't know what else it was gonna be until we started working on it, really. And so like a lot of things that, like a lot of the stuff that was happening it was actually like emotionally challenging, and also we kept, whenever we come to design solutions that Bastion did, we would try to purposely not do them. Because we were like, no, we did that already, we gotta do something different, which actually like hamstrung us through a lot of the process. I think a popular example that Greg and I think about a lot is like, we try to change the camera perspective for Transistor like 9 times, did a bunch of different tests, and then the camera we arrived at is like 2 degrees off from Bastion. It's like the same, it's like, and that was like a bunch of time. So.
And that was
just
that just
to give
like
us
a reaction?
a little more depth.
Yeah, no, we needed.
Down just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we were making a game in a city. We were afraid that you'd just be staring at rooftops because that's what you do in an RTS game. So it's like an example of the types of stuff we were trying to solve for.
And that was a reaction to you didn't want people to think you were just making another Bastion. Was that it? Or?
I don't know. The thing is, this is what's so fucked. Sorry.
Here.
We like never talked about it.
Right.
It's like we were just doing it. We were doing these things and trying to make it work and trying our best. And it wasn't like someone was like, no, it can't be like Bastion. We were just carving paths that were trying to avoid that.
Right.
We did want to see if we could do it again, though. Like, I think that was, that aspect, I remember at least being kind of an explicit goal where like, we loved making Bastion. It was a success. We went through, broadly, we went through this process of like world building, all this kind of stuff, and then people liked it. So it's like, wow, we can do this. We can make stuff up and have people actually like it. In the wake of the success of something like Bastion, obviously you could just go and make another game in the same world, but for us it was more exciting just to try something different again. And so we really wanted to make a game that could stand on its own 2 feet, like have its own strong identity, not sort of be in the shadow of Bastion. So that, that leads to the kind of stuff that Amir is saying, where we're like almost like afraid of Bastion overshadowing this game and afraid of it being too similar to Bastion in a bad way. And that was something that like all through pre-production we were definitely like just kind of struggling with, trying to make sure the game stood out in its own respects.
That said, the best YouTube comment on the reveal trailer for Transistor forever was Bastion 2 girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should do like a special edition version of the game. Darren, did you feel that creative pressure as well? Was that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a lot like when a band makes their first album. They have their entire life to make that first album, and then like a year or 2 to make their second album, right? It's like the same. It was sort of that same pressure that I felt like. Just the pressure to avoid the sophomore slump was real for all of us, I think, and just, like Greg mentioned, trying to give this game its own identity and yet sort of have it feel like the same group of people made it and have the fingerprints of our thing that we do, and kind of define for ourselves, well, what is our thing that we do exactly, and figure out how much of that, it was because I think a lot of the decisions on Bastion were like, what can we do? Let's do that. And on this game is like, well, let's do something different from that. Can we do those things? We don't know, So a lot of it was finding out, and for me too, it took me forever to find the musical style for Transistor. It took me, I think, about 6 months of prototyping music to really like hone in on the style that I was pleased with and felt good about for this game, and that gave it its own identity. Because like the first few pieces I made, they all kind of just sounded too much like Bastion. I was just trying to use the same techniques that I used on Bastion. It just kind of wasn't working for me, and giving it its own vibes. But finally, I think Old Friends was the piece that I made. That was the one I was like, okay, that I'm gonna do that. And
the whole thing was meandering, right? In fairness, it wasn't like, if the whole thing was, really sharply coming together, then it might have been easier for you. It's like all of us were kind of wandering.
Every aspect of the project. I don't know, except for Jen, I don't know, Jen, what your experience of the early part of Transistor was.
I just couldn't hear a single word that Amir said to me.
What was your experience of the early part of Transistor?
My experience in the early part of Transistor.
It was easy.
It was like diarrhea. It was easy.
It was like going number one. I don't know how much I can add, I guess. It was that meandering feeling. I think we were just feeling like both the relief that Bastion would be able to sustain a second thing, and then also I think we all, as creatives, we kind of align in like the desire to take on a new challenge. So I think we get bored. That's why things like Pyre come out of our studio. It's just like, it comes out of the left, hopefully in a good way. But yeah, on Transistor, I feel like when I think about it now, I recall like an intense anxiety around having to draw a lot of buildings. I was deeply disturbed that maybe I wouldn't be able to do a good job of it and make it as charming and lovely as like I think it's easier to make like fantastical things charming than it is sci-fi things, at least for me. And so I was constantly chasing the desire to inject some kind of element into our world building visually that would help kind of make the world shine on its own in a way that wasn't just like, it's a building made of concrete. And also, like, again, because I didn't want to draw buildings, I was trying to find like the easiest way for me to make something feel like a city without actually making a city. So that's why if you look closely at a lot of like the Transistor buildings, they're just like, they're cubes with like rectangles on the side of them that are windows, and that's like it. There's actually not a lot of embellishment there that like indicates that it's actually a city. So it was like 2 parts like give me a challenge, 1 part pure laziness. And yeah, we meandered for a bit, but I think like I remember this like intense feeling of relief when we decided to make the tone video. I don't know if we're skipping ahead.
No, do it. We're there.
Segue right into we made this like tone video because I think all of us creatively we hit a certain point where we all kind of felt like we're in a rut right now. We're like at 80%. We're just not quite sure if this is what we want, and we can't tell where the other person's head is at either. And so we made this like 2-minute
Yeah, I think it's
video?
like maybe 2-3.
We have it on our...
You guys tweeted it like a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
We released it, I think, on the 5th anniversary.
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. And Darren had made an audio piece, Greg wrote some dialogue for it, and then I drew like a bunch of art. Logan did an amazing performance. And it kind of like just weaved. It was the first time we saw like the story, the audio, the tone of the world, the environment, the setting, the character all like come together just really solidly in this way that like made us sit back and say, yeah, we can, like this is a thing we're really, really excited about.
Let's go make that.
Yeah, let's make that. I think we like that, and because we like that, we hope people will like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
And then it was still really hard from there. Then we're like, okay, we're making a game about a woman whose like lover's soul is trapped in a cyber sword. We're all in on this. And then we start making the game, and like we start playtesting it, and everyone's like, cool, you guys are doing the narration thing again. We're like, nobody knew where the hell the voice was coming from. When we were in, and it was for me, it was like really terrifying because from our perspective, it was like a pretty different storytelling technique in the sense that it's a character that's in the world, kind of responding to to the action as it happens, as opposed to a seemingly omniscient narrator like in Bastion. But yeah, nobody knew what was going on at all. Feedback that persisted all through development and quite a bit beyond the initial release, in fact, in various capacities. But we had to do this thing of like making the sword flash, which may or may not seem simple to you as a player, but for us it was like a pretty big deal. Making like a 2D only game, we had to develop this technology where it's synced to the voiceover and flashing in sequence. This kind of big and technical investment, but then that solved that particular problem. Then people knew, oh, it's the sword that's talking or whatever. But that's like a micro example of many aspects of the project that were like actually really tricky to solve, even though we kind of knew where we wanted to go.
I think game design wasn't helping either. It was like the initial prototypes for Transistor were like completely incomprehensible to all the most experienced game players we knew. It was like it was sort of a CCG and sort of something else, and then it evolved and evolved and evolved over time. And actually, similar to the tone video, the moment before the tone video was actually the character reboot. The character reboot, we were telling a story about a different person in that world, and then it switched to red, and that character reboot like saved that game. And then on the game design, we had this really confusing system, and there was a moment where Gavin saved the game design on that game, where he was like, what if all these things, because there were 60 things, were the same thing? There became only 12 or 16, 16? Yeah, 16. So like 100 things became 16 things, and everything made more sense, or as much sense as Transistor was ever going to make.
Yeah, but then we still combined them all.
So we
still a lot of work.
Still a lot of work from there.
Interesting you talk about a character reboot, because it won't be the last one we talk about on today's panel.
No.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about that, avoiding the sophomore slump, but also trying to find new creative ground and be comfortable there, and also be comfortable riffing off of ideas that have worked in the past. Which is why I am so excited to talk to you about Pyre. Because Pyre it's not just unlike anything you guys have made, it's unlike anything. It's like Wizard NBA Jam, with like more story, more characters, more dialogue, and several different types of gameplay sort of overweaving. Did the idea for Pyre come fast? Like, I can't imagine it did.
There was, it was definitely, much like Transistor, a lot of it evolved, but there was always something. I would look back on each of our games and see, like, I think we got to a destination we always intended to, just in a very kind of circuitous, lost in the woods kind of path. But with Pyre, it was this idea. I think Amir brought it up first, of like the experience of retirement, almost like in the athletic sense of like your star player, like either saying goodbye to your star player or to like a close friend. That experience of like you've been with someone through thick and thin. This person's carried you, through all kinds of tough situations, and then pat on the back. I'll see a man, not in like they're dead way, in like in more of like a happy, bittersweet way. That was one of the that was the feeling we wanted to get at. We were excited about that, and then this sort of like fantasy road trip, like ancient mythic world kind of thing emerged quite early. Actually, those ideas did stick. But as you hear me describing it, it's like, how precisely do you play that? Like what exactly, what do you do in the game exactly? That stuff we really had to figure out. But it was great to, and even thinking about that moment, the retirement moment, like looking back on it, how do you even prototype that, right? Because we had to like build so much of Pyre before we could even realize that we like did have a moment like this in the game. You have to have time to get invested in these characters, and then have this intense experience where you prevail, and then you do say goodbye to one of them, and then even keep playing afterwards so you could experience the loss of that character no longer being there. So that, in hindsight, that's like pretty tricky. It's like, we had to really find that, but I don't know if y'all.
No, I think all of our games have been a reaction to the last game we made, which is why often when people ask us, "What are you going to do next?" I can honestly say I don't know, because you don't know how you're going to feel until you're done with it. And Transistor's world was really small and intimate, and we wanted a larger group of people that you could kind of get closer to and spend more time with, and that was a through line. There was a lot of people in Pyre from the very start. There was going to be a lot of people. You know, they were initially randomly generated people, and then they weren't anymore. And that was like another 20-month journey or something, because Pyre had another really long pre-production as well.
Yeah, it was going to be we were kind of developing all this kind of like procedural storytelling stuff. Actually, a lot of it did stick kind of in the second half of the game. But initially, we were just like rolling these random characters, and sometimes ourselves on the team or playtesters would have this really awesome experience of like, oh my God, I got this this dog guy, rookie, green tail, whatever, with a certain personality, and we're like, wait a minute, a certain amount of the time, these randomly rolled characters are really, really good, and some of the time they're not that great. It's like, why don't we just kind of do the thing that we think we could do well of crafting some of this, but then keeping a lot of it much more open-ended for the second half, and then it kind of pans out into this. Gavin, I think you did the math on the permutations of the epilogue, because it's all based on your game state and the choices you make, and it's like there are something like 200 million ending permutations that are possible in Pyre. We're like, that was a lot of work, I guess, for 12 people.
Yeah, your poor playtesters. That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Make sure they all worked. You said every game is a reaction to the previous game, certainly at the start of the project and trying to do something new, but also you can see the learnings of the previous games in the new games. And when it comes to Pyre, especially when I play a game like Hades, in terms of the audio team, like a lot of dialogue, a lot of different characters, a lot of different types of voices, that sort of work had to be done. Was that new ground for the two of you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
yeah, we made up a whole language for the game. There was there was no universe where we could have fully voiced Pyre because so much of the narrative is procedural. Even though it should hopefully read like complete sentences, it's being kind of cobbled together based on the characters in the scene and all this stuff. So we developed a fake language for the game to like add some flavor to all the characters. We'd done a bit of it in previous, like in Bastion, the Ura characters that you face toward the end. We did little bits and pieces of it, and it was a lot of fun. And in Pyre, we kind of went all in on it. But yeah, even that turned out to be quite a bit of work of like getting these actors to record like hundreds of these lines, where we would write the line in the fake language, we would write the line phonetically so the actor could actually pronounce it, and then we'd write what the subtext of the line was so it would sound like something that is a real thing someone would say.
And then we ended up throwing that out, and Greg, you ended up just hooking up stuff that kind of sounded like the emotion, because the subtext didn't always come through in the delivery from the way we ended up doing it. So
yeah, it's just going line by line through all the dialogue, fishing through hundreds of lines. This one feels right for this particular sentence and so on. But it's like, it was a fun way of like, adding, the game is filled with like really kind of unique flavor through the art and the music and everything, and the Logan's voiceover is the Archjustice, and the Saurian language, I think, was a nice little touch.
It was fun to finally play a character that like doesn't like you.
Yeah.
Did you go down the route of the Simlish route of creating the Bible or the dictionary of the world, or was it?
Yeah, we had like hundreds of words in like a dictionary by the end. We had a whole like formal pronunciation guide and all this kind of stuff.
Can any of you remember any of it?
What's that?
Can any of you remember any of it?
Oh,
I can.
What's that mean?
I did all the female voices for the Scratch box because I was the only girl at the company. It's awesome.
Excellent.
Sri Lavagan's nominee, Sinto Sunoban Suma.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know why they cut me from the game. What the heck?
You got a lot of your emotes.
You were still one of the.
I do grunts.
Yeah, no, they had full lines. Like some of the you were one of the female nomad, not one of the named characters. Jen's in the game.
Jen has.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, Logan did like. It was really fun because you did like so many voices in that game, and you have the main speaking voice, but then you did a ton of other characters.
Yeah.
Logan did characters. I did a couple of characters.
Yeah, a couple too. Yeah.
It was the first time we had a big. With each game, we like expanded the voice cast a little bit, and with Pyre we went bigger, and then with Hades we've gone much bigger once again, finally doing full speech and stuff.
Yeah.
You also expanded the team as well. More people were involved in it creatively. In the last episode of our Hades series, we talked to Camilo about his influence on the project as well, as an animator and as a creative. I guess, Jen, what was it like working with other folks on the vision for that game, on how it looked, and did it come together? You know, I feel like some of the older games, they have I don't know, it's like a tight artistic style. Pyre is such a broad universe that there seemed to be so much more work to be done in terms of the vision.
Yeah, so we kind of knew that going into it because, as Greg mentioned early on, or Greg and Amir mentioned, early on we knew we wanted a larger cast and we wanted a more expansive world than something like Bastion and Transistor. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. It was still just me on the 2D art side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, the other two artists that were with us had actually joined during Transistor. Josh, our effects UI guy, who's amazing, and Camilo, our super talented 3D guy. So we had worked together for quite some time already by then, which was nice. We had been able to have creative synthesis. And I think Pyre was I think it was directly in Camilo's comfort zone as far as just far more expressive characters and ability to play with shape in a way that we kind of didn't get to do in Transistor as much. Josh can do anything, so he was comfortable. and it was really me, I think, actually, that was going through I was going through my artist midlife crisis or something. I was like, I'm so done with painterly. I've done everything painterly. I want to express myself in some other form. I need some new inspiration. And I actually had just recently gone to, right when we were in pre-pro, I had gone to a convention called Big Wow Con, which is this smaller. Anyway, I picked up this art book from this artist called Sergio Toppi, if anyone knows him. He's just this incredible Italian comic artist who has all these beautiful shapes and use of negative space and highly detailed ink work. And I just was so inspired, and I was like, what if I could use Pyre as my excuse to try some of that stuff? So it actually, a lot of really early Pyre stuff actually started out much more pen and ink looking. It gradually faded away as I, crept back into my comfort zone. And also, I couldn't figure out how to make something both super inky and also bright and beautiful and colorful in the way that we wanted to. We knew we wanted to make the world. So yeah, it was a bit of an art crisis for me. It may or may not show, I always say, and I don't know if I should say it, but I always say the characters actually look really different from the environments in a way that I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's a thing. But it was creatively exciting for me to try a style that was slightly different. And the crazy thing to me is that in spite of me feeling like I was stepping so far outside of my comfort zone, everyone was like, oh, I could tell immediately that it was a Supergiant game. And I was like, what was all this suffering for?
That's how you can tell. Because of the suffering.
So yeah, I mean, the pen and ink stuff came back in Hades.
Right.
Yeah, so that part is cool. But yeah, Pyre, it was an artistic struggle, but the good type. And it was so cool to work at a studio that was comfortable with me trying something different. I think I will never ever take that for granted, and it's just awesome that we get to do that here as creatives. But yeah, it was a lot of work. Just like any other artist, I'm I want to fix 1,000 things about it. But looking back on it, I think all the artists who worked on it, Camilo just did these amazing animations with these characters, and Josh, of course, made these crazy, or actually the Legacy of the Aura. Yeah. That wasn't fun. The auras, for those of you who haven't played Pyre, the auras are these they're these circles that go ellipses that hover around the players, and Gavin used math and science to stitch together Josh's art. But it was like for as simple as it sounds, like draw a circle around a character. It was like it took a lot of time. I think Josh suffered silently a little. But it came out looking really cool. But there are moments like that in game development for everything you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have only a few minutes left to talk about your latest game. I guess the suffering was, suffering in real time sounds a lot more fun. So let's do it in early access. You can suffer along with the players as well. I mean, we've covered a lot of the game on the series, so I don't want to not talk about that stuff, but also want to step on ground we've already covered. One of the things I know that came up in our discussions while we were talking to you guys last week was the fact that you actually went through a character change on this one as well. The main character wasn't always Zag, right?
Yeah, that's right. We nailed down many aspects of Hades like much faster than any of our previous games. We went through like a more structured process and had a clearer sense of what we wanted to do with the game. But specifically, we were going for our starting point was a Theseus and the Minotaur type, so still Greek mythology. And we were so drawn to the idea of the labyrinth as like the perfect setting for kind of a roguelike experience, the ever-shifting labyrinth. And our big twist was going to be that, once you descend, even past the Minotaur, you'll go down into the underworld, and face maybe the Minos, the king, who's one of the judges of the underworld, so on. You should read up on it. It's good stuff. But as we were super excited about that. But as we were working on it and we're like trying to make the Theseus character, we're just kind of like, yeah. Sometimes over our 10 years, I think we've reached a point where we iterate on everything as like a really important part of what we do, but sometimes you find yourself iterating a little too much, and you're kind of like, you get to this mode where you're starting to kind of almost like check boxes, like you feel good that you've addressed the feedback or whatever, but it's like, wait a minute, are we even still excited about this? We just kind of weren't feeling it. It was a pure feel thing. We were like done with Theseus as a character, and we came back actually from a holiday break, and it's like, man, something's off about this. And it was just much more spur of the moment of like, what if we start in the underworld and it's about getting out of hell instead of going down into hell, and you're the son of freaking Hades because there's like a scrap of mythology suggesting that he has a son. And we're all like, wait, that sounds pretty cool. And Jen, it's like excitement-based development. Darren was more into it. Jen was more into it, and it's kind of like when we could start producing stuff based on the theme and we're just more fired up about it, it's going to make going through the tough parts of development much easier instead of kind of getting stuck in a rut. Like, if we're not excited about what we're making, like how is anyone else going to be? So that's how
Greg is underselling it. That process, which would have taken like a year and a half in 2014, took like 2 days on Hades, because I think that's the power of having worked together for so long and actually had gone through character reboots and start to get attuned to those feelings that you have. It took a lot less convincing than any of the other sort of twists and turns we had to make, because once he identified the feeling, it's like, oh yeah, I feel that too. And then once he identified a solution, I remember when you pitched it to me, you just turned to me, you said all the things you just said, and you were like, and we could call it Hades. And I was like, awesome.
The really fun thing is we got Theseus and the Minotaur back into...
Yeah, they're just jerks in our game. Yeah, it's awesome.
Hey, the Minotaur's pretty nice.
Yeah, he's a nice dude. Sorry.
Yeah, awesome. So that's actually another fun thing. Like, we find over time that some of these ideas just boomerang back toward us. And I've personally learned to I really value the ideas that just kind of don't leave for a long time. That even the aspects of Transistor were just stuff that we kept coming back to over months, if not even longer. And it's like, if we're still excited about something after all this time, we should weave that into our game. And so they're packed with little things like that, I think.
And by the looks of it, all these people are still psyched after all this time as well. Thank you so much. That's our panel. That's all we've got time for today. I sort of blew it there, but can we do a final round of applause for the team of Supergiant Games?
Also, just like on behalf of the entire team, we are only able to make games together because of the people in this room and people like you out in the universe. So thank you for keeping us together for 10 years. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.